morning from Jill and me. You're watching the BBC's Breakfast News. It's 6:30. The headlines this morning, Friday, the 6th of December.
The good news this morning in North London is that Robert Maxwell did not realise his ambition to take over Tottenham Hotspur earlier this year. This morning, Spurs' new management, led by Alan Sugar, are due to reveal the extent of the losses run up by their predecessors as they launch a share issue to cut the club's debts. Peter Collins now reports on the football world's latest attempt to get its finances in order.
Walsh, Gascoigne, it really is going somewhere now. It's a brilliant goal, and that's what he can do. And the crowd loved it.
While Spurs were on the road to Wembley last spring, the club's parent company, Tottenham Hotspur plc, was in crisis. Its bankers were pressing for cuts in the company's mountain of debts, and its diversification into the sportswear business had been a flop. Then, two important events brought Spurs back from the brink. Winning the FA Cup raised several £1 million more from television fees, ticket sales and sponsorship. And then manager Terry Venables brought in Alan Sugar, head of the Amstrad Electronics Group, bringing with him a cash injection and his considerable expertise in marketing. Spurs' finances now depend on keeping in this year's FA Cup competition for as long as possible, as well as bringing the television cameras to White Hart Lane for matches like the crucial league tie against Liverpool in 12 days' time. For the 20,000 or so Spurs supporters who regularly turn out here at White Hart Lane, what happens on the pitch is obviously far more important than the balance sheet of Tottenham Hotspur plc. But the fact is the club's financial worries mean they're now having to contemplate life without Lineker and Gascoigne. The sale of Gary Lineker and Paul Gascoigne will help to cut the club's debts, and now a huge marketing drive is planned to raise more money from television, sponsorship and selling copies of the team's kit. Alan Sugar says these fundraising measures are currently operating at only 20% of their potential, abroad as well as at home.
Tottenham Hotspur's football club is a very famous football club throughout the world, and people shouldn't underestimate that. Not only in overseas membership, but in overseas television rights. And what has been agreed in the past, as far as television rights for the club at the moment, is perhaps not what we're going to want in the future. We see lots of revenue coming from overseas.
Meanwhile, at Upton Park, West Ham has launched a scheme to sell Hammers bonds to its supporters to raise most of the £15.5 million it needs to become an all-seater venue. All league clubs were told to do this by the Taylor report, which followed the Hillsborough disaster. Last night, West Ham's managing director invited supporters to Upton Park to explain the bonds. They'll cost up to £975 and pay no interest. But the holder will get benefits, including first preference on buying tickets. Using the bonds to pay for the improvements will mean the club's regular income can be used to avoid a repeat of their recent visit to the second division.
It will mean that every single profit that we make on general trading will be able to move into the transfer market, and will enable us to put new and different type of players on the pitch.
Those top clubs who'll join the new Super League next year will get a boost in their income from advertising and television fees. But that could mean less money for the struggling clubs in the lower divisions. Some of them could disappear altogether.
Peter Collins reporting.
Sugar says prospects for Tottenham Hotspur are better than he ever imagined. Hello, welcome to Business Daily. Today, Spurs goes on the attack with an ambitious rights issue. Will Rakel's uncompromising defence flush out a higher bid from Williams? As the US drifts back towards recession, can the Bush administration do anything about it? Rifling through the family shopping bag, restraint from the Bundesbank fails to calm the foreign exchanges. And 48 hours to Maastricht. Will John Major sign on the dotted line? The financially ailing football club Tottenham Hotspur announced a rights issue this morning that will vastly reduce its £10 million debt. And after 13 months suspension from the stock exchange, it's expected to be requoted in the new year. The company, now controlled by former manager Terry Venables and entrepreneur Alan Sugar, said the rights issue would raise about £7 million. The new shares will be priced at 125 pence a share and offered at a rate of 4 new shares for every 7 held. Alan Sugar is underwriting the issue to the tune of about £4 million. But the company also announced that losses for the year to May amounted to £1.7 million. So Jamie Robertson asked Alan Sugar what would have to change to bring Spurs into profit.
Well, what has changed is the disposal of loss-making activities, a complete reshuffle of the management, much stricter financial control, obviously reduced interest charges, reduced financial advisor charges. We don't need them anymore, and there was a hell of an amount in there. And that's basically what's going to change. Increased revenues from sponsorship and from marketing activities, which have only been running at about 20% of their capacity. So that's not what's going to change, it's what has changed.
The kind of money it's going to cost to buy players, particularly in the kind of league which you want to be in, isn't that going to just shove up your gearing again? You're going to have to borrow more?
Not if I've got anything to do with it.
Why not? How are you going to do it?
Well, it's a balance of disposals of other players and acquisitions of others, and an apportionment of profits that we will put in a pool towards purchasing players and disposals of other players. But we just cannot write out cheques for players if you haven't got the money. It's as simple as that.
Do you think football can actually really be a very profitable business?
Absolutely. You know, when I came into this transaction on June 21st of this year, I said that, and now I'm in it and been in there for 6 months. It's better than I thought. What I've seen is better than what I thought. The potential of the profits of this company are much better than what I ever thought.
Alan Sugar of Tottenham Hotspur.
Very good evening to you. First of all, football, and Tottenham's coffers are on course to be swelled by nearly £7 million. Alan Sugar, the man who bought joint control of the club with Terry Venables back in the summer, is putting together a new rights issue and will put in a further £2 million of his own money buying some of the new shares. It means the future looks far brighter for Spurs than it did before the takeover in the summer. But despite the influx of cash, Sugar says the sale of Paul Gascoigne to Lazio still looks likely to go ahead.
Good afternoon. Sport and Tottenham Football Club have announced losses of nearly £3 million for the financial year ending on May the 31st. But computer tycoon Alan Sugar says the club he helped save from bankruptcy in the summer is well on the way to recovery. Shares, which have been suspended at 91 pence since October last year, will be unfrozen on New Year's Eve.
Good evening. And England footballer Paul Gascoigne has been given a 12-month conditional discharge after he admitted assaulting a man outside a restaurant in Newcastle. Paul Gascoigne appeared before magistrates at Newcastle upon time. He admitted punching a man who'd knocked over his teenage sister. The soccer star said he was under great pressure because people always wanted to have a go at him.
BBC One.
Good evening, the headlines from Newsroom Southeast. And Gascoigne in court as Spurs go cap in hand to their shareholders. Michael now, of course, with sport.
Well, football dominates the news tonight with the second round of the FA Cup underway tomorrow. And financial matters also weighing heavily on managers' minds. But first, Paul Gascoigne finally appeared in court in Newcastle this morning and pleaded guilty to assaulting a British Rail worker outside a restaurant in Newcastle. He was given a conditional discharge and found not guilty of a second assault charge. The court heard the player tell police everything happened in the heat of the moment. Not because I caused it, but because I'm Paul Gascoigne. That's one of the reasons why I feel like packing the game in. Nobody in the world understands what it's like. Well, better news for Spurs fans today when the club's benefactor, Alan Sugar, agreed to underwrite a new share issue. Tottenham went public in October 1983 with their shares priced at 100 pence each. The shares were suspended in October 1990 at 91 pence. Spurs fans increasingly voiced their anger at the club's financial problems. But to rejoice this June when the club was bought by manager Terry Venables and multi-millionaire computer boss Alan Sugar. Today, Tottenham launched a near £4.5 million rights issue, offering current shareholders the right to buy 4 shares for every 7 they own at 125 pence each. The issue is underwritten by Alan Sugar himself, meaning that he has to buy any unsold shares. As for Tottenham's ordinary shares, the suspension on them will be lifted on December 31st.
I wouldn't be guaranteeing an underwriting of a rights issue 6 months after the event if it wasn't an even better business than I thought it was when we took over on the 21st of June. I mean, I'm not totally nuts.
This week, Terry Venables was quoted saying that you no longer had a need to sell Gascoigne.
He's quite right in what he said. We are contractually bound to sell Paul Gascoigne to Lazio. We have a contract, and if he passes his fitness test on the 31st of May, he will go. And if he doesn't pass the fitness test on the 31st of May, then he will stay.
I think most shareholders will be encouraged. The price is high, but to a certain extent it doesn't matter whether or not shareholders take up the option because Sugar's underwritten it, so all the shares will be bought.
If the rights issue is successful, there is possibly £4 million available to them. If you look at a realistic estimation, they're selling to established shareholders who already have a commitment to the club. You could expect realistically a 50% issue. That's £2 million.
The worry will now be not so much for clubs like Tottenham, but the clubs that don't make the Premier League. In soccer, the rich will get richer and the poor definitely poorer.
Gascoigne, the Spurs and England soccer star, was given a conditional discharge and ordered to pay £40 costs after he admitted assaulting a man who knocked over his sister. Gascoigne, who'd missed 3 previous court hearings, appeared before magistrates in Newcastle upon Tyne. He told police he might give up football because people picked fights with him.